So we hope you're doing well. Board now, back with Rachel McDonald, and I'm not going to do it. I almost burst into song there, but no, man. I mean, it couldn't be any worse than Derek in this movie. That means we return to Woodsboro for the Scream franchise. So this is going to be Scream 2 from 1997. So the first Scream was such a hit, and they sort of got this quickly in production for the next year. The first Scream, actually, I'm pretty sure I saw this, but I think at the time was the highest grossing, certainly slasher movie ever, and
that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and it held that record up to Halloween 2018. That broke it, so only a few years ago. So yeah, it held that record for so long. So Wes Craven to direct and Kevin Williamson to do the script. We said in our last review, then really they are a bit of a dream pairing. Wouldn't have been the same kind of movie if you lost just one of those elements. So we're back with the principal characters, really. Sydney Prescott returns. We're now sort of a year onwards, and she has now moved to college at this point. And the sort of backdrop to the opening of this first film is they've, of course, have done a film now of the events of the first film. So they're getting like doubly meta on that front. The film is called Stab, and the film kind of opens with like the big premiere of that, if you like. And so we start to get the return of our old Ghostface, but of course it's going to be a different Ghostface, a different killers in this film. And it sort of gets a bit more into the media stuff as well, but Sydney is, moved on with her life. She's at college now. She's got kind of a new group of friends, but also we get together the old Scream gang, like Dewey, like Randy, like Gail Weathers, who has a new cameraman now, which is quite amusing. And
yeah.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole backdrop. Then they start to realise then there could be like a copycat on their hand. Do you think of Scream 2?
I think I hold a somewhat unpopular opinion when it comes to this movie, because I actually do have quite a few issues with Scream 2. So I know that it's actually a very popular sequel. When it first came out, I think a lot of people were actually saying that it may even have been better than the first one. I definitely do not agree with that assessment, or at least on par with the first one. I think that there are parts of this movie that work really well. I think that Sydney as a character is fantastic again. I think I really like seeing how she's doing, X amount of years later, how she's dealing with the trauma. It seems like she's trying to get her life together. We have that great scene right at the beginning where she gets a phone call and it's, the Ghostface voice on the other end. And she's like, oh, who is this? And he's all like, who do you think it is? And she picks up, because this is the 90s, she picks up her phone and she's like, this is Corey Wilkins from, your number is 555. She's obviously gotten a bit genre savvy. She's gotten a bit smart. She's obviously used to people kind of coming after her and stuff. And, you get to see her, as you said, you see her deal with the media a lot more this time around. They're on campus, they're trying to invade her life. So I think her characterization is very strong, and the way she's trying to move on with things. Gail Weathers is always fantastic, and she's back this movie, and she actually, I think, is a lot more involved in the storyline this movie than she was in the previous movie, where she was kind of a secondary character and an antagonist. She's been bumped up to kind of, main character status here. Yeah. And yeah, she's really good. And of course, we have Dewey and Randy returning. And so I think all of the returning characters are still really solid. The new characters, on the other hand, aside from, so we will get into this, but we have our new characters that we are introduced to are Mickey, who is kind of like a Randy 2.0, kind of like a extreme kind of film geek, played by, who's his actor? It is Timothy Oliphant, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, he's become very popular recently, Timothy Oliphant, but he wasn't as well known back then. At
this point, no.
Yeah. Mickey's actually probably the best of the new characters, I think, because he's very entertaining and Timothy Oliphant's having a lot of fun playing with him. I kind of feel like he's if you mashed Randy and Stu together. He kind of has that kind of energy, you know. He's a little bit crazy like Stu, but he's got like the movie knowledge like Randy. Then you have Sydney's new best friend, Hallie, who is very obviously supposed to be the new Tatum. I don't love her. I think she's a little bit bland. They try to give her the kind of overprotectiveness of Sydney that Tatum had, but it doesn't quite work the same way. And she wants to join this sorority, which is a whole thing. Portia de Rossi and Rebecca Gayheart play the sorority.
Very 90s casting.
Very, very 90s casting.
And then you have Legends as well, wasn't she?
Yes. I don't mind Rebecca Gayheart, and I think that she got this role because she lost out on the role of Tatum in the first movie. So they wrote this role
I didn't know that.
For her. Yeah. And then you have Sydney's new boyfriend, Derek, who is the blockiest block of wood that you could ever come across.
Terrible.
He's like Riley times 1,000. Like, I mean, he makes Billy Loomis, who is a psycho serial killer, look like a better boyfriend. And that's saying something. I mean, Derek's pretty much sole purpose in this film is to be in love with Sydney. He doesn't really do anything else. And Jerry O'Connell is not an actor without charisma. I have seen him in other things where I've liked him, but in this, I don't know if it was the character or the casting or the script, but he is just so bland. And so, like you mentioned in Scream 1 that you find that Billy has no charisma, I find that Derek has even less. Like, if Billy's at a 0, Derek's at like a -10. Terrible. So I don't think the new characters are great. And we'll get into this more as we get into talking about the events of the film. But the script of this film is actually really messy. And I think that had to do with the fact that part of it was being written as it was being filmed because they were worried about spoilers and leaks. And I think at one point in time, part of the script actually did leak and they had to change some things. We talked about in the first movie how well planned everything was, you know, how Wes Craven had the killers hold their knives certain ways, how certain scenes were planned so that you could always tell how things transpired. But there are so many incidences in this movie that just make no sense and logically shouldn't actually be able to happen. There is at least twice where where Ghostface teleports. He seems to teleport because he goes from one location to another in like 0 amount of time with no logical explanation for how he managed to do that. Things like that. So,
hang on. But when you say that, do you mean when he's in the same location? Because, of course, there's 2 killers, so it could be explained away.
When he's in the same location. So we've got a scene where he goes from, like, one end of a room to another with no logical explanation for how he managed to do that. And then another scene where he goes from one end of the street to another with, again, no logical explanation for how he managed to get from point A to point B. And these are just some of the examples that I found that kind of, for me, drop this movie. So I find, so for me, this movie...
Interesting.
I think from... the opening scene, which, again, we're going to talk about, which I don't think is as strong as the first movie's opening scene, but it has some merit. From the opening scene to a certain character death, which we'll get into it, but there's a certain character death where once this character dies, the rest of the movie just kind of falls apart for me. And it's not because of a death, that just happens to be the point at which the movie derails. I'm not a massive fan of Scream 2. What about you? What are your thoughts on overall on the film?
I think I'm more positive than you. It certainly is a step down from the first one, quite a big step down. But no, I think it's this weird sort of one where, on the one hand, as a sequel to the first Scream, it sort of delivers because it's still, as a Scream movie, it's still entertaining and you still get some trademark Scream type moments. And obviously, I think the important things is the core cast from the first one are back and they're on good form. I do like actually the progression of Gail in this, the fact that she... in this, it is a bit more drawn towards kind of doing the right thing, but you also have that tension of, is she just doing a performance or is she, generally she wants to catch the killer sort of thing. So I like that as sort of like a move forward for Gail, and she is a bit more central, like you said. I obviously once again loved the chemistry between her and David Arquette. I think the scene when they're first reunited and there's a bit of friction and back and forth, I think it's a really good scene. Again, you have some good stuff with obviously. Well, Randy, I really like the scene with him and Dewey where they're just talking about the potential suspects. Like that back and forth is like really funny. Again, I think I agree that it's the characters that are introduced which are sort of weaker. I mean, I don't necessarily hate Ali, but I agree she does feel like a lesser version of Tatum. Definitely not the same sort of character. Mickey's an odd one just because I think that sort of character was maybe done better in the first film, and I think especially when you see the way the film ends and now watching it as a rewatch, I think maybe it sort of stands out. I think what's funny is more of a psychopath than Stu in a funny sort of way. Maybe just because the actor I'm used to see him in play that sort of role, but it's sort of a weird one. I guess he's fine, but I think on rewatches, I'm sort of looking at him and thinking you're a psycho, aren't you? You're a psycho. But I totally agree on Derek. I think he's totally bland. I think he's very irritating and just lacks any sort of personality. I also think it's a little bit lazy that then they return to the boyfriend red herring. Like, is it the boyfriend, isn't it? I thought that was a bit lazy, regardless of the way it actually went in the end. But I thought that was one example where they could have freshened it up and not gone with that. I do like the way they go further with the media stuff. And just speaking of actually new characters or a character that Cotton Weary, I think he is actually a really good addition to the cast in this. I think, I really like the actor anyway, and he's just a fun sort of anti-hero, and I think there's some good suspense surrounding him over, like, could he potentially be the killer, or what's his motive, how dangerous is this guy? And I think that
he's a good red herring.
And I think it's a really strong performance as well. I think the way he sort of reacts to other characters, and I think I was glad we got a role for him in this film. And I think it's a solid sequel. I think it's mostly a satisfying sequel. I think, again, there's some good meta stuff. Again, maybe the horror scenes aren't as good as the first one, but I still think there's some solid kills and some solid sort of tension. I think, the scene with Sid and Ali in the car, for example, I think that's quite a tense scene. Quite well shot, seemingly leaping from one end of the scene. I don't know. To me, that either I didn't notice it or it didn't bother me, because I'm just pretty sure something like that must have happened in the first Scream as well. Because I think Ghostface does have this kind of thing where he does pop out of nowhere, and it seems like he was somewhere else a minute ago. So I don't know. I guess if I did notice it, it didn't really bother me. But
we'll get into the exact scenes once. I guess from here on out, we'll say spoilers ahead, because we've done our little overall thing. So from now, we'll start getting into the good stuff. So lots of spoilers. Again, most people watching this review have probably seen Scream, but on the off chance that you haven't, first of all, go and watch it. And then second of all, spoilers from here on out. So maybe we should start with the opening scene and see how we went with that. I was saying to Stephen that I feel that ever since the first movie, that opening scene is so perfect, that Drew Barrymore scene. And we spent like a good 15 minutes in our last video just talking about that scene. And I feel like because they set the bar so high with that scene, that really none of the movies have managed to live up to it, their opening scenes, at least not for me. And well, what are your thoughts on this opening scene? I want to hear your thoughts before I give mine, because I think they might be a bit more positive than my thoughts.
Yeah, I enjoy the opening scene. Obviously, I agree. I mean, that opening scene from Scream 2 is so good. I mean, it might be one of my favorite opening scenes ever. So
Yeah.
I guess it was never going to match that, but this one, and I think as it goes on, you sort of have to suspend disbelief because it does get a bit unbelievable the way these cinema goers are just going crazy for everything, and just
I
it's like
know.
it's like
Is
they're
this
at
an
home or
American
something.
thing?
It's like,
Because I have
yeah.
never seen a cinema react like that ever in all my years of going to the movies. I've never seen it. So I was like, is this an American thing? Do people just scream at the TV show? Is this like a culture thing? Does it happen in the
Well,
UK?
no, not that I've seen. I mean, I know American you tend to get reactions like this more, but I mean,
Yeah.
even in the US, because I've been to a few films in the US, I've never seen this. I mean, it's obviously a premiere, but no, I think they've just gone really OTT. They're just
Yeah.
going for the feel of it, but no, I think it's an enjoyable scene. I mean, again, I sort of like the banter between this couple. I like, obviously. I mean, we were watching it last night on stream, and when we get to a later scene with Derek's, Cindy had a good point, and it's like, well, they're slagging off Sandra Bullock movies here, but the scene later with Derek, I mean,
Oh, I know.
they've got some nerve slagging off Sandra Bullock movies,
And then
but
putting
no,
that scene in. I
yeah,
agree.
but I enjoyed this couple. I enjoyed their back and forth, and I think although in a way the scene is very over the top and silly, I think it achieves what it wants to do. I quite like the sort of kill in the bathroom with the knife through the cubicle, like just through the wall. I quite enjoyed that, and I quite enjoyed it. It's the future Mrs. Will Smith, in fact, Jada
Yes, it
Pinkman
is.
Smith. And I think she's quite good at the way she's like reacting to the movie on screen, sort of thing. Is quite good. And again, although it's very unbelievable, I think they achieved the visual they want at the end with her like on the stage and just dying basically, and slowly everybody else. It's like, oh my god, this isn't part of the show. I guess they must have thought it was part of the show or something.
Yeah.
But
Into this opening scene, I'm with you. I think Jada Pinkett Smith is probably the best part of this opening scene. I love her commentary. I love when they have the spoof off the opening scene from Scream, and she's all like, now why she got to be naked? What has her being naked got to do with anything in this scene? And I'm like, yeah, girl, you tell them. I'm with you. Completely unnecessary nudity. And, when she's all like, no, don't go in there, and she's screaming at the thing. I thought that was quite fun. I think my issue with this opening scene is that there's really no tension in it until we get to the part where she gets killed in the cinema. And whereas if you look at the opening scene from the first movie, you have that build-up of tension. We talked about the popcorn being the timer until you get to the point where the kills start to happen and you are already so on the edge of your seat. Whereas this opening scene, I mean, I guess they didn't want to do a carbon copy, which I get. And I do kind of like having the stab movie and kind of mocking the opening scene from the original film. I thought that was like a nice little meta nod, and how they got, some big name stars at the time. You had Heather Graham, and then later on you have Tori Spelling with that nice little callback gag, and Luke Wilson and stuff. So, I like all of that. But for me, it just felt like, I don't know, a bit underwhelming. Like, I don't know how they could have built tension better, because the scene doesn't really lend itself to it. So maybe it was just the whole setting. I also do find it, as much as I think the bathroom scene is a very effective kill scene, that's a damn strong knife to be able to go through a bathroom stall and a human skull. But my thing is, like, how did they know when he was going to go to the bathroom? Is the killer just hanging out in the bathroom waiting for the right guy? And how does he know he's got the... Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about with this movie, that I think you have to introduce a more willing suspension of disbelief for this film to kind of, like, it doesn't seem well thought out.
Yeah, it's true, because I mean, I was going to come back and say, then the killer was just Wayne in general, so any guy. But we find out later that there is a pattern. So in theory, he had to be targeting. I mean, unless he just followed him into the bathroom, and
that is true. He could have been waiting somewhere else and followed him. That's actually a very good point. I didn't consider. But yeah, because I'm thinking, what if he didn't have to go to the bathroom? What if he just stabbed some people? Fine, they just go through a whole movie without having to go to the bathroom. So that, like, again, kind of took me out of the scene. But that being said, I do think that Jada Pinkett Smith death, I think that is actually quite horrifying. I think that's actually very effective when she's running through the crowds and she's being stabbed and people, like, all the chaos around her is masking what's actually happening. It kind of reminds me of like when mob scenes get out of control, or even just recently there was, you know, a rapper who's like a bunch of people died at his concert, you know, because you get lost kind of in the crowd. So that sort of is quite terrifying. And I do think her final scream right before she dies is like horrifying. It's a really guttural scream. And I like the moment where everyone kind of realizes, oh shit, this isn't part of the movie. This is real. So I think that part of the scene is effective, but the rest of it is kind of a little bit lost on me. So I don't think it's the strongest opening, but like I said, I think ever since the first movie, I don't think any of the other movies really have, like, I think they just set the bar too high. And I think once you set the bar that high, it's almost impossible to live up to it. So
mind you, I mean, in a different sort of way, I really enjoy the opening to number 4. They go for something different. I mean,
we'll talk about that when we get to that.
We will, yeah.
I actually said that to Stephen last night. I actually said, I think of all the movies, I think number 4 actually has the best opening scene because it does have a little bit of a bait and switch to it. So they at least tried to do something new there. But yeah, this one, and when we get to number 3, do not have, I think, the strongest opening scenes, but this one at least has a little bit of the horror going for it, because I do think that Jada Pinkett Smith's eventual death, I do think that is quite horrifying. And just this idea that you could be in a crowd and this horrible thing could be happening to you, and all these people have no idea, you know, they're all just acting like it's part of the atmosphere. I think that would be quite horrifying. So I think that's that part of the scene was quite good. But I do think after that scene, when we get reintroduced to Sydney, I think we get a really great stretch of about 40 minutes or so where the movie is just really, really solid. I think when they reintroduce Sydney and they reintroduce Dewey and Gail, I love when Sydney and Gail come face to face and Gail pulls that little stunt where she brings out cotton without telling Sydney, and she gets smacked in the face again, which once again she completely deserves. So it shows that even though those two kind of saved each other at the end of the movie, they still have that kind of antagonistic relationship. I like seeing the progression of their relationship over the next few movies as well. Sydney and Gail have a very interesting dynamic, because it's kind of like they're at the point where it's like, okay, so we've saved each other's lives, so we kind of, you know, owe each other that, but we still don't really like each other.
Trust each other. Don't like or don't. Exactly. Yeah, and I think this is probably why this is a big movie for Gail, because this might actually be the movie where she, like, Sydney feels at the end she can completely trust her. You know, yeah.
And then we get an introduction to, we talked about new characters, but we didn't talk about Gail's little mini-me, little shadower, Debbie Salt, who, of course, is going to have a big reveal at the end of the movie. But Debbie Salt, played by, the actress's name is
Laurie Metcalf.
Laurie Metcalf, that's the one.
Great actress, yeah.
She is a great actress.
She's
and
brilliant.
Debbie Salt is a very interesting character who is like a little mini Gail shadowing her, trying to be like a reporter. It's actually kind of funny to see her follow Gail around and, you know, have a little bit of hero worship going on. And Gail is like, yeah, I don't have time for you, honey. Like, I love when she asks Gail for a quote and she's all like, you know, your flattery is a insincere attempt at, you know, trying to get on my good side, and I can see right through you. And she's like, goodbye. So she shows that, you know, she's still Gail. I love the film class scene. I think that's a really cute little scene, little meta scene where they start discussing sequels and how sequels are always inferior to the first film. Randy gets a line wrong, which bad Randy. The "get away from her, you bitch" line. Joshua Jackson had it right. It is "get away from her, you bitch," not "stay away from her, you bitch." But so I like that scene. I think that's a fun little scene. And then I think that a lot of the other scenes following that are really strong. When they go to the party, reintroduction of Ghostface.
Yeah, and I mean, just reference-wise, there's quite a deep cut in that classroom scene, because Joshua Jackson's character mentions House too. I mean, so that's a pretty deep cut, I have to say.
It's a pretty obscure reference.
Because a lot of the sequels they mention are ones you would know, sort of thing, and he actually comes out with the big guns with House too. So that's pretty cool. But no, it's a fun scene. It's quite a fun.
That was a refilmed scene, actually. There are two different versions of that scene because they realized that they needed Sarah Michelle Gellar's character to have more to do before killing her off. So they originally had that scene shot without her, and then they refilmed it so that she would be a part of that scene so that her character death later on would have a bit more of an impact. So the original scene plays out almost exactly the same, just with a different character to Sarah Michelle Gellar. So, of course, yes, we have Buffy in this film, which is great. This is when she was doing, I think, season 2 of Buffy. So she'd already done I Know What You Did Last Summer at this point. So starting to make a bit of a name for herself in slasher films, because after this she went on to do The Grudge as well. So I like her little appearance in here. Sarah Michelle Gellar. But I think it worked really well showing, Sydney and her life. And then they go to the sorority house. And, of course, that's where Ghostface pops up again. And, I mean, can we just talk about how awesome like Sydney Prescott is, how like she picks up the phone and it's Ghostface on the other end. She's like, "What do you want?" He's all like, to kill you. And she's like, "Well, why'd you come out and face me, you fucking coward?" I'm like, yeah. Sydney Prescott is so done with like this shit. She's like, "I don't have time for this. I'm trying to live my life. If you want to take me out, then come and take me out." Like, I just think she's such a great character, and she has so much, like, she's just so done with people trying to kill her at this point. She's like, I'm not taking this. So I think she's just great. Oh, did you know Stu is at the party? Matthew Lillard is actually an extra in that scene.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's somewhere. I've never managed to spot him, but I have seen people pull up like screen caps where you can just kind of vaguely see him in the background. So maybe all those rumors about Stu being alive in the fourth one are going to be true.
Well, I was going to say they would have to disguise him pretty well, because otherwise that would just stand out. But gang and another thing I like is then Dewey still got his limp from the last movie. That's good continuity. So the way he sells that is really good, and just him stumbling around before, like, it's when Sydney first like sees him, and it's almost like he's still the same Dewey, and he's got the limp, and there's lots of fun stuff, especially with him and Gale, and when he's like saying, "Well, you said this about me in your book," sort of thing, and there's just this great sort of like chemistry and this like comic timing between the both of them, and it's great, because I think getting that core group back together is really good. And again, there's some good meta stuff I sort of quite like, because when they're talking about the Stab film, because Randy says, to Dewey, I think at least you got David Schwimmer to play you, and that's obviously a friend's thing, obviously with him linked to Gale, and Gale played by Courtney Cox, so that's pretty fun. There's some good
they
stuff.
have another one like that later on, when Gale and Dewey and her cameraman are talking. Someone's like, "Oh, she's just upset because of those news pictures." Like, it was just my head. It was Jennifer Aniston's body. I like that one as well.
I think some of like the media stuff in this, I think that is the main stuff that's fresh. I think they do go a bit even further than they did in the first film. So I think that was very welcome. I obviously liked the character of the Laurie Metcalf character, what she added, and her off to the side. And I think just wondering, because certainly when I first saw the film, for whatever reason, it didn't dawn on me that she might play a bigger part later. I just thought, this is it. Gale's sort of an icon now, so it's almost like this sort of, we've got another version of Gale trying to fight her way to the top of the gang. That sort of coffee shop conversation with Randy and with Dewey, when they're just going through the suspects, and like when one of them says, well, if that person's a suspect, you're a suspect, it's like, okay, let's move on. So, there's some good back and forth in that scene.
No, that one is a good one. I do like that. Anything with Randy is good value. And yeah, I do love that scene, yeah, because that's where they point out, they go to the suspect list and they're like, oh, Mickey's like, but if I'm a suspect, he's a suspect, then so am I. And Joey's like, oh, hang on, well, maybe you are a suspect. And Brandy's like, well, if I'm a suspect, then you're a suspect. And Joey's like, you're right. Let's move on.
Yeah, that's good.
So that is a great scene. One scene in particular that I want to touch on that I really love because I thought it was really effective is the scene where Sydney is rehearsing for her play. And the play is an old Greek play about Cassandra. And there are people in masks on the stage. And as she's running through the masks, she sees Ghostface. I think it's such a brilliant scene because I think that, first of all, it's actually a really scary scene. I think, again, that fear of being lost in like a crowd and something scary happening to you while everyone around you thinks that it's just the norm. But there's also a hint in the scene that you don't 100% know if Ghostface is actually there or if Sydney is seeing things because of the setting. And like maybe it's not part of her PTSD. Like I think we are supposed to think that it was actually Ghostface, but the scene does play out in such a way that it could just be her trauma manifesting because she's on stage, the lights are flashing, everyone's in masks. So yeah, you just don't know. So I thought that was one of the more effective scenes of the movie because I do have to admit, I don't find this one that scary. Even like when I first watched it, like obviously I've become desensitized to the Scream film, so none of them really scare me anymore. But like when I first watched the original film, I remember finding it quite tense and quite scary and quite horrifying. I don't really find this one scary at all. Like there aren't really that many scenes that I find very tense or very horrifying. I don't know why, because I mean the kills are all still pretty brutal. But it's just not as good. I mean, the scenes are fun. Like I do really like Sarah Michelle Gellar's death scene. I think that's a fun scene. I think that's played out really well. I think that's well directed. But again, it doesn't have that same kind of tension and that same kind of like horror that the first film does. So I don't know if it's just me, but I don't find this one as effective as the first one. What about you?
That's fair, and it's well, no, I mean it isn't. I mean, there's nothing as scary as like just the opening scene from Scream. But
I know.
I think the horror moments generally work quite well. I think there are a couple of tense scenes, and the kills are solid, if not as good as the first one. But yeah, it's one of those. It's hard to put your finger on why that would be, you know, because you've obviously got Wes Craven back. You've got obviously it is a similar sort of plot. I mean, it might just be that thing of, you know, second time around a sequel. So maybe unless you do something a bit different, then maybe it's hard to recapture that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we go through these films, I think Ghostface does become less of a threat as we go on, but
action is still fine. I mean, a lot of the scenes are still really strong. They're just, I don't know what it is about this one. I just do not find it as scary, and I don't find it as tense.
Sarah Michelle Gellar death scene is the fact that there was a random bike on the landing sort of thing for her to throw at. I don't know who leaves a bike parked upstairs.
Up there, I know, right?
Quite funny, yeah.
I didn't actually really think about that, but you're right. Kind of randomly there for her to just like, Oh. I also love the way she answers the phone. Just the Omega Beta Zeta. We just love saying that. My friend and I just love running around. Omega Beta Zeta. Oh, did you know that is Selma Blair on the other end of the phone?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, the voice you hear on the other end of the phone is an uncredited cameo by Selma Blair. So next time you listen to it, you'll be able to hear it. Not a scary scene, completely out of nowhere scene. We're going to talk about the Derek scene. Let's pause for a second. So you mentioned earlier, Keith mentioned that they do the whole boyfriend red herring thing, which we've obviously been through. So I agree that it was kind of a bit of a snooze repeating it. So Sydney starts to get, you know, worried about her boyfriend and starts to pull away from him. So we have this really random out of nowhere scene where Derek decides to reenact Top Gun, which I've actually never seen. So I don't know how well he's reenacting this scene, and sings a song to Sydney in front of like the whole cafeteria, and like everyone's getting into it. And it's supposed to be seen as like this big romantic gesture, but it's just really cringy. And I don't even know what the point of this scene was. I mean, he ends up giving her, I guess it kind of links into later on because he gives her his Greek letters to wear, and then like later on in the scene, his frat buddies like kidnap him because you're not supposed to give them to like your girlfriend, even though you technically kind of are. It's kind of like one of those, you're not supposed to do it, but you do it, and then this happens when you do it kind of thing. I don't know. We don't have sororities and fraternities here in Australia, so I don't quite know how they work in America.
Us neither, I don't think.
Yeah, they seem a little cult-like to me, but that's
definitely.
Just right?
Yeah, no, it's a super sort of cringe-worthy, cheesy scene. It's comes out of nowhere. I mean, it's just in a way a makeup type scene. You know, he wants to make it up with her, but it's so over the top, and the way everybody reacts to him. I mean, I'm pretty sure in reality most of them would have been taking the piss out of him and
definitely
what are you doing, you idiot, sort of thing. And yeah, no, and it just feels like something out of a romantic comedy. It doesn't really belong in a Scream movie.
No, it's completely out of left field. It's just so random, and it just kind of brings the movie to a halt, and then then that's it.
It's also over the top because it's not like they've had a massive fight. I mean, they're still sitting there together at dinner. It's like, because the sort of gesture it is sort of almost if he was proposing to her, he might do them. But this is just a makeup type thing, you know, just showing my affections for you. I'm here for you. So it's terrible. It's a terrible
it really
thing.
is. I don't know if maybe Kevin Williamson was watching Top Gun when he was writing this script, or he was just feeling nostalgic for Tom Cruise. I don't know, but it's just the weirdest out of nowhere scene that just does not feel like it fits in the movie.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the reason it's there, just because it is another meta thing or another, like, you reference another big movie type thing, but it's still not a very good scene. You still have to make it work within the world of this film, sort of thing. And I sort of feel in a way like this film, and it's not necessarily a criticism of it, but I actually do think it's a little bit more pulpy and over the top than the first one. Like, throughout the film, I mean, I'm not talking obviously the first one. At the end of the first one, it gets really like that, but generally throughout the first one, it feels pretty grounded. It feels quite sort of realistic. This one doesn't necessarily have that. I think this one throughout, there's stuff like that kind of happening. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I guess it means at times it's not as effective of.
Yeah. Half over the top and half wanting to be kind of grounded like the original, you know, like when we get to the third movie is completely over the top, but it's like that way from the beginning. Like the entire movie has that cheesy over the top feel, so it doesn't feel as jarring, whereas I feel like this movie tries to do a little bit of the grounded stuff, especially when it comes to like the characters, like when it comes to Sydney and Dewey and Gale, but then it also veers into that really over the top territory, so it's almost like it's a bit of a tonal inconsistency in this movie. It goes a bit up and down. I feel like some of the comedy doesn't land as well in this movie as it did in the first movie. In the first movie, we had characters like Stu, who is so naturally funny, and Tatum, who has the sarcasm. But this film, you have like the sorority sisters, who are obviously supposed to be comic relief, but I don't know, I just find them slightly irritating. And Mickey can be entertaining, but at the same time, not as much. I don't know. I feel like it goes a bit up and down, this movie. Sometimes we have some really serious, good scenes like the theater scene, and then we have the scenes like the cafeteria scene, or some of the death scenes. Okay, so we're going to get into big spoilers here because I want to talk about a particular death scene, and that is Randy. We need to talk about Randy and his death scene. And so for me, this is the point where the movie starts to fall apart, is Randy's death. I think the build up to it is not bad, like the phone calls and stuff, but I am always struck by how contrived Randy's death has to be. Like, the killer is in a van parked on the edge of this massive square where Dewey and Gale and Randy are all running around this square. How are they able to get Randy at that exact point, at that exact time? And then you have like once he's pulled into the van, you have those three teenagers with their massive like boombox, because let's really show this is the 90s, walking past the van at like the exact right time to hide the fact that Randy is being killed. Like, this is what I mean about this movie does not have the same kind of like logic that the first movie does. It's like it seems much more haphazardous and unplanned, and like you couldn't really set these things up. And so, yeah, so Randy's death, first of all, I'm very pissed that they killed off Randy. Like, I know we have to have deaths. I know that we have to have big character deaths, but why did you have to kill off Randy? We all love Randy so much. Like, just let Randy survive. I think even after this movie, there were like petitions to like show that he somehow miraculously survived. Like, he was whisked away to like some, you know, mountains to recover, and he somehow is going to pop back up. But if you had to kill him, you couldn't have killed him in a better way. Like, it just seems so contrived to me, Randy's death, at least for me. What about you? You seem like you're going to disagree, which, bring it on.
No, it's fine. I don't mind it. I think it's a well directed scene, and there's some good back and forth. I like them. They keep checking people's phones and stuff.
I do like that. Yeah,
well, that's a good touch. And I don't know, like the boom. For me, the boom box stuff it's just a gag, so I kind of don't mind it. It's something I quite enjoy about it, but and I think it's a decent death. I mean, I understand your thing about, you know, again, you know, they had to get Randy to the thing, so I think that's maybe a bit contrived, but it didn't really bother me. I mean, in a way, I don't know if he was necessarily targeting Randy. You know, it might have just been the first. Like, in a way, he might have just been messing with them, and then if he happened to get the opportunity to kill one of them, then that's like a bonus. Or
no, fair enough.
But I get what you mean. Yeah, it's because I think there's a couple of scenes that feel similar. I thought the thing that led up to Derek's death is a bit contrived as well, just like the way they got him there. So
timing, and we're going to get into that. But yeah, I find from Randy's death, so from this point onwards in the film, anytime I rewatch this film, I find myself just tuning out after this. And I can't, when I was watching it last night, I was trying to watch really intently and try and pinpoint what it is about that final act that just doesn't work for me. And I can't seem to. And that's what's really frustrating me, is I usually am able to like put into words what exactly it is, but it's like almost like a combination of things. I don't like the useless cops. I'm tired of useless cops in slasher films. And I know that this was the 90s, so it hadn't really become a trope yet. But the fact that they put Sydney under police protection and then the two dudes are just completely taken out, like, at least in the first movie with Dewey, he was a young cop. He was a rookie cop. You could understand him being a bit inexperienced and maybe the killer getting past him. Also, he was supposed to be a red herring, so you could understand. But like, they literally put like 2 FBI agents on Sydney, like guys who were supposed to be like trained to protect her, and they get taken out like that. And it's like, really? You two dudes are going to get taken down by one dude in a mask? Like, it bugs me. I can't quite explain why.
Yeah, because also I get the impression they're not the most professional, because like that scene in the library, one of them just leaves Sydney alone. It's like just wait here a minute, and you don't do that. I mean, that's rule 101 of being like a bodyguard sort of thing, because it's obviously at that point then Cotton comes in behind us sort of thing. So yeah, they're pretty. That's security.
I do, however, agree that scene in the car after the car has crashed, when Hallie and Sydney have to climb over the unconscious ghost face, that is a very, very tense scene. And I will give the movie props for that scene. That is so well done. And how Sydney kind of hesitates because she wants to take the mask off, and Hallie's like, no, just go. And I'm with Hallie. I'm like, girl, just run. Like,
so a good character thing for Sydney, the fact that she actually wants to confront this, and there is some logic on her end saying, well, by the time we get the cops and that, he'll probably be gone. But I sort of like it as a character beat from Sydney. It's almost a bit of hubris, which almost costs her, or certainly costs Hallie anyway. But it's for the character, I like it, and the way it's shot is very good and very tense. So it's a scene I like. Yeah.
No, I agree, and it is one of the few scenes in the final act that I do think are effective. But they get out of the car. So the car is sitting at one end of the road, and there's a brick wall behind the car, and then the rest of the road is clear, right? So Sydney and Hallie get out of the car, and they start to walk away, and they're halfway down the street, and Sydney's like, oh, no, I want to go back and check. Because, yeah. And then she goes back to check, and he's disappeared, and then he somehow materializes all the way up the other end of the street behind Hallie. He jumps out from behind a wall. How did he do that? There is no logical way that he could have gotten from that car to that wall without them seeing him. And this is what I'm talking about like willing suspension of disbelief in this film. And this is only one killer, which we will find out, which I will confirm when we talk about what's going on elsewhere. There aren't two of them here. There is only one of them here. So he has literally teleported from one end of the street to the other with no explanation. And for me, it kind of takes me out of that scene because I'm like, well, how did he get there? He's like become supernatural now.
I'd have to rewatch the scene actually, because I'm not sure if there's a passage of time when he might have had the chance to, like, because obviously the it sort of works for the effect of the scene, because the idea is that he's disappeared into thin air seemingly, and then he comes in from the backside. Another thing, actually, this is going slightly off topic, but just speaking about Ali and then the opening scene, I do actually enjoy the running commentary on like blacks in horror movie, like African American. That's quite smart the way they set that up, and also I love the cameraman. You know,
he's Joel. He's awesome. I do love him because he knows what's up. I love how he just gets out of there. He's just like, oh hell no, I'm not sticking around. I'm going. This is why he survives, because he's smart enough to get out of Dodge.
Yeah, and that's sort of a nice, like, sort of tie over from the first film as well. The fact that he knows the history of what happened to our last cameraman, but so yeah,
but he also points out, he's like, brothers do not do so well in these situations, and I'm like, yep. And you have the opening couple talk about that as well.
Yeah.
He's like talking about some white ass people getting their white asses cut the fuck up, and then they get the ghost face mask, and she's like, oh, and look, it's white. So, that is some good commentary. I agree. But yeah, look, that scene, in all honesty, I think if you're watching the movie for the first time, it took me a long time to realize that he teleported. So I don't think it's too big a deal. I think it's just one of those things that you pick up on when you rewatch the film a lot. So I think within the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge issue, but it builds up. You know, there's just so many. It's like if you take one contrived incident, that's fine. Two, you're starting to stretch it. But there are so many in this movie that when you rewatch them, they just start to build up, and it just starts to become to the point where it's like, okay, there's only so much suspension of disbelief that you can employ. Like at some point in time, you have to start questioning, how is this happening? And like I said, I think it was one or two coincidences, fine, but yeah, there's a whole heap of things. There was another thing I noticed with the timing of the final act, which, again, I don't know if it's a huge deal, but when we get into the final act, you see the scene at the library where they decide to take Sydney to a safe space. And then you see Dewey and Gail at the cop's shop figuring out that they're repeating the Woodsboro murders. Then they go to the audiovisual place to look at Gail's footage, because they figure
I was going to bring up this scene.
So they go there to watch the footage. This is another teleportation scene. They're watching the footage, and then all of a sudden they see Ghostface at the top of the auditorium in the watching room, and Dewey goes up there to investigate, and somehow while he's up there investigating, Ghostface teleports from up there down the bottom of the auditorium to pop out behind Gail at the front. So again, I'm not sure how that worked, but Ghostface goes from the top of the auditorium to the bottom in, I think, less than a minute. And it's like, how did this happen? And we know that it's not the second Ghostface, because the second Ghostface is off following Sydney. So somehow these guys have got supernatural powers.
Yeah, because it is about the same time, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's true.
At least I'm going to assume it is, because this scene then leads into Dewey getting stabbed. Again, I swear he's got like 10 lives at this point in time, Dewey. He's just invincible. I just don't think you can kill him off at this point. He survived so much. But Dewey gets stabbed and left for dead, and then we switch back to Sydney and in the car with the cops and Derek getting kidnapped by his frat buddies. And there's a good 20 minutes between that and the final showdown where Dewey is just lying in this booth bleeding out. How did he not die from his injuries? If again, I don't know if we're supposed to think that all of this is happening simultaneously. Like, that might be the case, but the way the movie is plotted out, it makes it look like Ghostface stabs Dewey. Then we have this 20 minutes where Derek's being kidnapped and the girls are in the car. And then we get the final showdown and poor Dewey's just lying there on the floor for 20 minutes. Coming back to campus and for some reason running into the theater building, because why not? You've just escaped a serial killer. Why wouldn't you run into the theater building? And then we have the final showdown in the theater, which, again, I just don't think is that great. At least not for me. What do you think of the final set piece and showdown?
No, I do like that. I mean, it's probably, like you said, probably random that she runs into the theater, but as an actual like setting for the big finale, the big sort of battle and stuff, I think it's actually a good setting. I think they do some good stuff with it, because I know at one point, I can't remember who's doing it, but I think it's Sydney or something, pulls down one of the ropes and like a light goes flying and stuff like that. So I think visually it's actually quite a good setting for like the final sort of battle, and if you like, all the big finale of the film. So even though it's a bit random that they end up there, I do actually quite like it as a setting. So
all right, so here's the big question. What are your thoughts on the reveal of who Ghostface is?
The name of the guy, I think, Mickey. I mean, that one's just whatever, because in a way it's just a bit like having Stu be the killer in the first one, and he isn't as good as Stu as a character. So that's like whatever that one. I guess it's fine, but it's sort of like what they did originally. Obviously the other one's a bit more interesting. You know, it turns out to be Gale 2.0. And then we get the further twist that then it is Billy's mother,
Billy's mum
from the first one. So that's sort of fine, and we get a whole motivation from her, and yeah, again, Laurie Metcalf is really good in that scene. I sort of like the stuff with Cotton, where Cotton's obviously got the gun, and then it's the two of them, and I just love her peeking out the back, sort of occasionally adding little things. And she's trying to like basically stir the pot. You know, Sydney's trying to convince him to like shoot her and not Sydney, sort of thing. So I think in many ways Laurie Metcalf sort of makes that scene. I think her performance is really good, and I mean, it's not a great twist, but at least there is some logic to it, and it sort of ties it to the first film. And I think Laurie Metcalf doing Unhinged is really entertaining. I think she's quite the presence in the scene, and again,
she got the crazy eyes. Good, like
she certainly does. Yeah. And again, there's some fun stuff with the characters that sort of feel a bit like the stuff you got in the finale of the first film. And again, I think obviously for Gale, this is a big film for her character. Again, she sort of, I think, proves at the end here that she has sort of grown and does sort of want to do the right thing.
The killer's eventual fate in the cafeteria scene that we were talking about with Dewey and Randy. Randy mentioned something about female killers, and he's like, Mrs. Voorhees turned out to be a fantastic killer, and I like that's a little hint, because obviously Mrs. Voorhees was motivated by the death of her son as well, so I thought that was a nice little shout out. I think Laurie Metcalf is great. Like, I think that she sells the character really well. Like I said, she got the crazy eyes going on. She's, you know, that scene, like you said, where she's poking out behind Sydney and she's like, Cotton, I can give you what you want. You know, come on, help me out here. But, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but there's something about the reveal of these two killers that just doesn't quite work for me. And again, it's hard to pinpoint why. I think you put your finger on it when you said it's not a great twist. Like, it does work enough, but it doesn't, I don't know, something about it just doesn't seem that smooth, you know, like when you get to the end of the first film and it's Billy and Stu, it's like, oh my God, yes, this works. This makes so much sense. But you get to the end of this film and you're like, oh, okay, that's who it is. And it's just kind of like, yeah, it works, but there's nothing really spectacular. And I think if they didn't have Laurie Metcalf, then it really would be underwhelming. Like, she really elevates that reveal with her acting and her. I agree that Mickey's kind of just like Stu 2.0, but he is supposed to be the patsy, so we're not really supposed to, like, the main villain is supposed to obviously be Mrs. Loomis. I saw a video recently where someone was theorizing that, you know, the whole repeating Woodsboro, that was just Mickey. So basically Mrs. Loomis just wanted to kill Sydney and Gale, and she needed a way to do it, and she's happened to find Mickey, and Mickey's like, oh, let's imitate the Scream movies. And she was like, okay, fine, if that's what helps get me my revenge, I'll just go with it, which I think makes sense, because I don't think, like, why would she want to, like...
Yeah, there is a nice line, isn't there? Something to do with her finding him on the internet or something like that. There's a little bit of an explanation there.
And he could also be like a surrogate for, like, her son, but then she does end up killing him. I don't know, just the reveal just didn't... Again, I feel like the first movie was so good with its reveal that, like, a lot of the other ones just don't feel as big as the first one, or as neat. But I do like Gale. Oh, sorry. Yep.
No, I was going to ask, do you think it has to be two killers, or could they just gone with the one? Or because I just wonder if it was just her and they left him out not being a killer. But then you don't really need him in the film, then, I guess. But
yeah, I think if we're going as far as motivation and as far as the plot goes, and narratively speaking, you probably didn't need Mickey. But I think logically you needed Mickey because Mrs. Loomis, from her stature and her physicality, could not have committed some of the murders. Like, Cece's murder obviously had to be done by Mickey because she gets thrown off a balcony, stuff like that. So I think Mickey's kind of there to be the brunt force, but I think that's why in the finale they kind of like brush him off. You know, like, the big showdown is between, like, Sydney and Mrs. Loomis. Like, Mickey, like, when you watch Scream 1, like, Billy is obviously the big bad, but Stu is also very integral, and Sydney has a fight with Stu as well. Whereas in this one, they kind of shoot Mickey and then he's out of the way for most of the scene. So I think that is supposed to be indicating that he's literally just there for the brunt force and to be the patsy. So narratively, maybe you could have just gone with Mrs. Loomis, but logically you needed Mickey, because it sounds sexist, but it's not conceivable that a woman of Laurie Metcalf's build could commit all of those murders. You know, when women kill, they have to kill in different ways because they don't have the physical strength that men do. Again, this sounds horribly sexist, but it's just the truth. I mean, when you look at Laurie Metcalf versus Timothy Olyphant, which one do you think is going to be capable of men?
And I mean, obviously it's maybe different if you're talking about maybe a 20-something-year-old woman who might be in good, you know, she might have got herself in good physical shape. You know, in this case, you get the impression this is pretty much just a regular, like, middle-aged woman sort of thing. Yeah. So I think the dynamic works pretty well of her being the mastermind, maybe, and him being the sort of, like, heavy muscle sort of
and thing. I think that's how the dynamic probably was. You know, she's the brains and he's the brawn. I don't know if this is fact, because, you know, on the internet there are so many different rumors about different things, but I do remember hearing that the original script, it was going to be Hallie and Derek were going to be the killers, and that they had to rewrite it. Again, I don't have I don't have, like, an actual fact. This was, I think, from IMDb, which can be unreliable, but I have heard that. Yeah,
I might have heard something similar. I mean, Hallie could have been interesting just because it might have given her a bit more to do as a character.
Yeah.
And I don't. I mean,
Derek would have just been a repeat of Billy. It would have just been.
And see, that's the problem with I have with them just rerunning that storyline, because at the end of the day, because it is just a repeat, it sort of doesn't matter if he turned out to be the killer or not, because it sort of doesn't really add or take anything away. Either it was Ali, the best friend, that might have been something different, and it might have given her a bit more to do in the movie. So You know, that could have been cool, but I guess obviously they needed to go with the dynamic of you had quite a, you know, like the muscle sort of thing, and
Yeah. So yeah, kind of, I think a bit of an underwhelming final duo. I think really elevated by Laurie Metcalf's performance. But overall, I don't know, the final scene just doesn't really work for me that
because
well.
I think the other thing is if they went with Derek and Ali, assuming that rumor is true, then they would have had to have come up with a convincing motivation as well.
Yeah, and
So
what would
that's
that have
another
been?
thing. Yeah.
It would have been odd. I'm guessing they would have gone with something like we're trying to replicate what happened in Woodsboro, but I mean,
Yeah.
Hallie, they at least maybe could have. I mean, it could have been jealousy based. You know, we see that she's trying to pledge a sorority, but they're only interested in Sydney and stuff like that. But given that Hallie was
True.
also
Yeah.
a black character, that could have opened up some unfortunate implications. So I'm actually glad that
Yeah.
they didn't go that route. I think that would have, if like I said, if that had been true. But like I said, I think Mrs. Loomis it's not a bad twist. It's just, I don't know, there's something about it that's a bit underwhelming. I can't quite put my finger on it.
I think as well it adds to the meta nature because in a way you could say they're just riffing off the Friday the 13th sort of, and it at least has some sort of link to the first movie. But
Yes.
and there's certain things like that I did enjoy. Then there was this copycat thing with him taking the name sort of thing, or sort of the same. Was it the same
Trying to
surname?
replicate Woodsboro. Just the same name. So some of the names were the same.
Yeah,
So I think someone had like the same last name as one of the first names or something like that. Again, though, I had a bit of an issue with, like, in the first movie, all of the kills are connected to Sydney in some way. You know, the first kill is her mother. Then Casey Becker sat next to her in English, which we discussed. They might have killed her to unnerve her, except for maybe the principal. Then they killed Tatum. They go after Dewey. These are all people who are connected very much to Sydney because she was the end goal. So once again, this feels like all of these characters are not really, they're just random killings. I mean, did she even know Cece? She didn't, we don't ever see her interact with Sarah Michelle Gellar's character. Aside from Randy, none of these kills are very personal, and it kind of, takes the focus off of Sydney, but it's just random people around her dying.
Well, true, but I guess it's just because, again, the name thing, so the copycat thing. So I think that's why I went after the people. I mean, in that sense, it's a bit odd then going after Randy because obviously you don't have the name connection then. But
I think Mrs. Loomis says something about, like, he got mouthy about Billy, so she just killed him because, like, he's flagged off like Billy, and
boy, yeah.
It's interesting with the kills actually, because there are more kills in this one, but they're nowhere near as inventive as the kills in the first movie or as bloody. You know, like, Jada Pinkett Smith and her boyfriend just essentially get stabbed. I mean, the setting of Jada Pinkett Smith's death is quite horrifying, but again, it's just a stabbing. Cece as well, she pretty much just gets
thrown off a building. Is sort of,
yeah, exactly.
Well,
She gets
stabbed and thrown off.
Yeah. Randy's death looks like it was interesting, but we only see the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
Derek gets shot. I mean, who gets shot in these films? That was just a lame death. Like, you know, when you compare it to, like, Casey and Steve, who were, like, eviscerated, or Tatum, who had her head smashed in a roller door, or even the cameraman getting put on Gale's car so that his blood comes down the windshield. Like, these are all really inventive, big, over-the-top kills. The kills in this movie are just kind of like, you know, they're not fantastic.
That's true. I think it's funny because the scenes themselves I pretty much enjoy, but yeah, it's the actual kills that maybe let them down
good build up. They have some good build up again, but then, like, not really much of a payoff, especially for a slasher film. And I mean, when we get to the third movie and we talk about that one was at least has the excuse of it was done post 9/11, where they had to tone down a lot of violence in films and TV. But this was done before that. This was done, like, in the prime of, like, the slasher revival. So it is very interesting, especially because Randy even says that, like, in the rules of a sequel, the kills are always bigger and more over the top, but they're really not. Like, he spells out this rule and then they don't even follow it.
No, I mean, I suppose you could read that as them subverting the rule, like on purpose, as a meta
Oh, fair
thing.
enough. That's a good point. That
Possibly.
could
I
be
mean, I
interesting.
might be
Yeah.
giving them too much credit, but it's possible because they did do similar things in the first
Mm.
film. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, the kills don't really stand out as much this time, just by the
Rating.
sounds of
So
it.
you
Yeah.
go first. What would you give
Okay,
Scream 2?
I mean, this might be a bit generous because obviously we have highlighted some flaws that drag it down, but I'll give it a 7 because I think
Okay.
it still delivers as a solid Scream sequel. I think most of what made the first film good are still there, and I suppose it's sort of crucial that then you have the core set of characters. I don't mind them killing Randy off actually because I think after a while, what else are you going to do with his
That's
character?
true.
And I
Yeah.
think you did need at least one big death in the movie. And
Yeah.
personally, although I like his character, if it's weighing his character up with the other three, I think it would be him that has to go.
True. Yes.
But no, it's a solid sequel. It's that weird sort of one where giving you some of the same is what makes it a satisfying sequel, but at the same time, certain bits like just redoing the boyfriend red herring is lazy, and obviously Cotton Weary, I like his addition. Definitely things that drag it down, and there's definitely a sense of it feeling like a lesser like Scream movie than the first, but
Yeah.
I do enjoy it mostly when I'm watching it. So again, nostalgia maybe. It's actually funny. I was going to say because I think it's in the bedroom, so I can't get it. Probably my mum's bedroom. But when I got this on video, when I like brought the video back in like the 90s, with
VHS.
yeah, there you go. There, with the edition I got, there's actually like a Scream 2 shot glass, sort of with it, as
Oh,
in,
that is
like
so
you drink
cool.
out of. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But I'm pretty sure it's in my mum's bedroom, so I better not disturb her to get it.
Bring it
But
out for the
uh,
next time. We'll take a
I'll
shot.
bring it out.
Well, maybe not a shot, considering it's morning here, but
Yeah,
breakfast beer.
well,
So 7 out of 10 for
for
you.
sure. 7 out of 10.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. I'm not quite as generous with this one,
Hmm.
just because there are a lot of things. Look, it's a Scream film, so that's always going to be a good thing. Love Sydney Prescott, love Dewey and Gale, love seeing all those characters come back. Like I said, the first 2/3 of the film I find enjoyable, not as good as the first one, but still enjoyable. But the third act falls apart so badly for me, and there are a few too many contrived coincidences that I'd probably give this a 6. So not
Yeah.
terrible. I wouldn't say it was a bad film in any way, shape, or form. It's still a solid slasher, a solid sequel. It captures some of the essence of the first film, especially when it comes to the characters. But I do think that it's messier than the first film. Obviously, it's not as well thought out. I find the kills a little bit underwhelming. The kills themselves are underwhelming. And like I said, the third act for me just falls apart so badly and is just so not engaging that it just drags down the enjoyment of the film. So I'd go at 6 out of 10 for
About
Scream 2.
6. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, having heard your thoughts, I'm not too surprised. I thought that might be roughly where you went on it. So that's
Yeah.
fair. I mean, maybe this is an example where I'm being the slightly
The generous one.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Scream 2. I think what's interesting is actually when we get to number 4, because number 4's one that over time might have been elevated more than when it initially came out. So we'll get there, but it might actually have a fight with Scream 2 to be the best of the sequels, maybe, because 4's one that actually improved on a rewatch for me. So that's,
Yes, I noticed that too. Actually, the last time I rewatched 4, I was like, okay, I enjoyed this a lot more than I remember enjoying it. So it will be interesting to revisit it. But Scream 3 is up next. We're going to have some beef with Scream 3 because I think I like this one a lot more than you do. So that one will be very interesting.
Okay. Yeah, no, that will be interesting. Yeah, so Scream 3 will be coming up soon. It won't be the next review, but it will be coming up in the weeks to come. So look out for that. But let us know what you think of Scream 2. How does it hold up as a sequel? Do you agree with our thoughts? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We are, of course, working through this franchise in the run-up to Scream 5, which I'm still going to call it, even though for some reason they're calling it just Scream. But that's out in January, so we're going to do the 4 originals, and we'll be ready for Scream 5 in January. So that's exciting stuff. Let us know your thoughts. You can also check out Rachel's channel if you want to give it a mention.
Just come follow me, guys. Rachel McDonald video essays covering a wide variety of TV shows and movies. I have been very sporadic with posting this year. It's been a rough year, but I will hopefully be having more stuff up soon, and especially in the new year. So just come follow me if you enjoy a good video essay and analyzing things. I've also got a Halloween ranking video that Keith and I did recently because we've recently done that franchise. So go over to my channel to check that out. And you can follow me on Tumblr and Twitter. All the links are in my channel, Rachel McDonald. So come follow me everywhere.
And on a similar note, I will also promote on this channel, we did our first top 10 list, which was top 10 horror villains. So the way that worked is that we actually both did a list, and then we kind of went back and forth taking it in turns. So that's now up on the channel, and is getting some pretty good responses already. So if you want to check out that video and let us know your thoughts on our picks, but also add your own lists in that video, kind of going to alterate it where we'll do a film list 1 month, a TV list the next. So we have some ideas moving forward. So check out our first top 10 list now up on the channel. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with Scream 3 soon, a review. Take care. See you guys.
Derek, penny for your thoughts? Morning. I woke up with this feeling I didn't know how to deal with. And so I just decided to myself, I'd hide it to myself.
What is he doing?
Tom Cruise, Top Gun, 1986.
No, it worries me to say I've never felt this way. So what am I so afraid of? I'm afraid that I'm not sure of. A love there is no cure for. I think I love you. Isn't that what life is made of? I know it worries me to say I better stick around and love you. Do you think I have a face? Let me ask you to your face. Do you really love me? 'Cause I think I love you. You are dead! Dead!
It's good old-fashioned revenge. You killed my son. Now I kill you, and I can't think of anything more rational. Everything's traceable back to Mickey, including the cop gun he used to kill everybody. But let's just suppose that you had gotten hold of the other cop's gun, and you chased Mickey, and there was a big shootout and a big scuffle, and you shot Mickey, killed Mickey dead. But not before he got off one shot at you. Okay. So, have I covered everything? Are there any questions? Any comments? You know what, though? Who gives a flying? You're as crazy as your son was. What did you just say? Was that a negative, disparaging remark about my son? About my Billy? No, Billy was a good boy. Billy was perfect. You did a bang-up job, Mrs. Loomis. Not wise to patronize someone with a gun, Sydney. Randy spoke poorly of Billy, and I got a little knife-happy. I was a good mother. You know what makes me sick? I am sick to death of people saying that it's all the parents' fault. It all starts with the family. You want to blame someone, why don't you blame your mother? She's the one who stole my husband and broke up my family. And then you took my son. You don't know what it is to be a mother.